Welcome back to the Whole Bible Podcast. This is your authentic host, Stasea. In today's podcast, titled I Feel Disrespected, we will begin discussing the third type of resilience, street resilience. Street resilience can be defined as taking the pain of disrespect, social inequality, discrimination, and regret, and using it as fuel to propel you forward, committed to being resilient. With me today, I have Roxanne, an associate family and marriage therapist, along with Linda, a transfer graduate student. Let's do this.
When I'm thinking of street resilience, a really good example that comes to mind is one of my role models, which is actually my father. Both my parents are role models, but my dad, in this sense, has really displayed this type of resilience. So my background is I'm Filipino, and I'm first generation. Both parents were born in the Philippines, so they had to immigrate into the U.S. So my dad, he actually joined the U.S. military, and there's so many challenges associated with that alone, on top of being able to just adapt and assimilate to that culture. So you're assimilating to, in that situation, you're assimilating to U.S. mainstream culture, and then on top of that, and then another one on top of that is the military culture. He was definitely, I know I didn't see a lot of it, but he wasn't fully accepted in the beginning for who he was. He spoke English really well, but he still had a very heavy accent, and was ridiculed for that a few times. And then a specific story that comes to mind is when I was really young, I believe I might have been around like 6 or 7, I actually saw in front of my eyes when somebody made the comment to my father in front of his family about having chinky eyes. And now, I understand that not everybody has that knowledge of somebody's background or that acceptance of someone's background, so I don't hold this against anybody. But, this was an officer that said this to my dad. And my dad at the time was a sergeant. So he was well below that rank, couldn't say anything to this individual. And, we all kind of just sat back and, smiled, just tried to show that we were still pleasant, we were still okay. And then later, maybe the next day, he discussed with us that we're going to come across this. We're going to come across different types of discrimination, and that's not going to stop you from achieving your goals. That's not going to stop you from being true to who you are. That's not going to stop you from loving that Filipino part of you, but then also accepting that we are also part of this American culture and we can celebrate both. So that for me was a really good lesson as far as like facing that discrimination, that that bias, and then being able to kind of rise above that.
That's a tough story.
Yeah.
Like you see it generationally happen and how that affects you and your person.
Right.
I think about my just like education about like microaggressions, because I'm white, I'm a woman, so I have that.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really understood it until like when I was starting to be educated, and it's like, oh, so like microaggressions, that's one way to do it.
Absolutely.
And the progression of that over time is just like, yeah, people get upset and angry. And I had this conversation a couple days ago where this other, I realized she was probably like very like white Hispanic, but she didn't identify with it. And she was saying that like, oh yeah, people like they're just always angry and this and that. But I think our culture now is that we're able to express it and talk about it, and that's why like people that are older or maybe not as older or maybe not as open-minded, they might not understand, like, well, people are just angry and they need to get over it, but if you don't experience it, then you don't know.
Absolutely.
So I really thank you for sharing that story, and I think it's important to hear.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for me, when I think about student resilience, I think about a friend of mine back home in Fresno. She is a DACA student, and I had the privilege of meeting her through Facebook. She reached out to me. She was a photographer, and I was involved with that community, and she wanted to hang out with me. But I learned a lot about her experience and wanting to get forward in life and go to Fresno State, and especially during the time when I was there, was a lot of fear around Trump, and still is, but it was still very new, and he came into office. But I learned a lot about her experiences, and I feel privileged to know what it's like, and her sadness, and still pushing through that, and having to live on her own and be apart from her family for like years. But I think some of the beautiful parts of it was just this past fall. Her younger sister, she's about 12. I got to meet her as well, and she came over. Her younger sister's a citizen, but she came to visit, and my friend, she had to pay for everything, and she's younger than I am, so I really respect that and look up to her, and she's still moving forward, and despite the adversities that she experiences, and she's also a psych student at Fresno State.
Nice.
So yeah, following kind of the path led there. So and she also has dreams of becoming a social work master's student too, so we have a really close bond, I feel like.
It's really cool.
It takes a lot of courage to keep moving forward, especially in this climate as a DACA student. It is very courageous.
Yeah.
I love that in a sense you both kind of touched on a hot topic of the different types of discrimination that right now people are facing, like in terms of migrating to this country, and as well as being a DACA student, since that was recently taken away. So I condone you both for looking up to people who have those experiences, when right now it's a time where everyone's looking down upon those types of stories, I feel. So it's important to raise those voices, and I condone you both for doing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, I just wanted to touch on too, because I hadn't shared it at all, but I think like for me, like it's very personal when I hear immigration stories, because my mom had immigrated. So when I hear about others that are minority status and immigrate, it's just like, that's very personal for me.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And I think like something we haven't also touched on is being women.
Yes.
You know, like, I feel like that's an understatement, but like, you know, we're breaking through barriers, and you know, it's definitely improved, but we still face that the stereotypes, the discrimination of like, well, you're a woman, you can't do this kind of job, and you know, it's kind of like, I feel like we have that advantage as women already, is we've learned to build that resilience, you know, that like, no, I'm not going to let your assumption of what I can or can't do push me down or stop me from moving forward.
Right.
But there's like a lot of successful stories, you know, where women become CEOs of companies, and you know, they continue to just push down those labels and those stereotypes, and I think that's so amazing and so inspiring for people.
Yeah, for me, I grew up in not having, I would consider it was pretty low income household. It shifted a lot, you know, my family broke up a few times, so that was hard in a sense of just like the pain of that experience. Linda and I were talking about ACEs.
ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a few of those. You know, and I remember one particular time during a family like gathering, someone said I was 16, and like for me, I was interested in boys. Like, I'm just, like, curious. Like, what's going on? Why, like, what? You know? I want to learn. And, you know, I asked a lot of questions, and I would talk about boys, and one of the women there, I can't recall who said it. I just remember the impact of what she said. But she said, you keep talking like that, and you're going to be pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah.
How old were you?
16. Wow. I was 16 years old. You know, I could probably spend a whole podcast talking about how it could have been addressed in the issues of, like, bringing down another individual, let alone another woman.
Right.
But aside from all of that, I took that pain of disrespect and I used that as fuel to keep moving forward. Like, I'm 27 years old, no children yet. Eventually would love to have children, but that was so disrespectful to me, and I was so hurt by it. For a while, I was just hurt. But I think that once I realized that I could use that pain as energy to push me forward, I used it to get myself enrolled into associate's degree. Like, it took me, I'm going to graduate this coming month in 2019, and I graduated from high school in 2009. So it's taken me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
But I feel like I learned a lot. I got a lot of experiences, and I think the biggest fuel from me learning a lot of things that I wish I would have learned earlier in my life, using those tools, and then using that pain of disrespect of what that woman said to me to be where I'm at right now as a bold scholar, as a person that's about to graduate. Like, even though they said those things, that I'm using that to push forward. And so it's like, a sense of being a woman. Like, I don't think I've ever heard like anyone tell any of the males in my family, like, oh, you're gonna get pregnant by this age, right? First of all, it's not biologically possible.
It'd be nice though. Not gonna lie.
Right, that would be shoulder some of the work. But I think that it was also like that you know, a lot of our male counterparts don't get that type of like talk, like where I felt like diminished, you know, because of my interest in other human beings and like exploring myself. Like, it almost felt like I was suppressed and trying to explore myself. So taking that and acknowledging it now for what it is, I'm able to use that energy to push forward. And then connecting to the immigration. So my family, we're Puerto Rican, and we're also African American, which my mom considers Creole because we were originally my family was originally from Louisiana. But I would like to talk about Puerto Rico, and a lot of people assume that it's primarily Hispanic, and it's not. I mean, they do speak Spanish, but I'm gonna just a quick little history lesson. So, a lot of slaves were actually brought to Puerto Rico. The Taino Indians were originally there, and when the slaves were brought over, there's a lot of mingling, you know, and hence why you will see like some Puerto Ricans that are darker than others. And so the experience of being like multi-race, multi-ethnic, it's been a challenge because like sometimes I feel like I have to leave my Hispanic side out the door, or sometimes I feel like I need to leave my blackness out the door. And I don't do that anymore, but I do acknowledge that I did do that because I didn't know, like, again, like that people pleaser aspect, like, am I going to be accepted if I,
like, am I American enough?
Right.
Am I black enough? Am I this enough? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm going to fit, so I'm just going to, like, hide it away.
Right.
But then going back to, like, that vulnerability, and then that vulnerability translating into authenticity, I had to, like, just fully embrace all of it, as all of it is me. And, like, all of it is a part of me, and there's no leaving out the door anymore. Like, I should be myself no matter what. And it did take some, like, building thicker skin to acknowledge that not everybody's gonna like me. Being a people pleaser as a younger person, being the oldest of 5 kids at the time, and watching them and constantly nurturing them and caring for them. As a woman, that's what I was taught, you know, to nurture. and that, like, for me, that inequality, it kind of hindered me because I was taught to take care of others all the time as a woman, you know, and now I recognize, like, I didn't get that opportunity, and I wasn't suggested to take care of myself, learn who I was, figure out who Stasea was. And so I take all of that knowledge now, and I feel empowered to explore myself, overcome the self-doubt, accept who I am, and utilize the aspect of street resilience from all of the disrespect, the social inequality, the discrimination, and regret that I've experienced in my life, and use that energy to keep moving forward.
I'm feeling empowered just hearing this story. I'm like, ooh, I feel that. I feel like
Thank you all for listening to this segment of the mini-series. Next, we have a short 90-second story from one of our bold scholars.
Hi, my name is Brittany Brennan. Today I'm going to be talking about street resilience, which is basically taking negative energy and turning that into something positive. My connection to street resilience happened when I was in high school. I went to a very low-income school where we didn't have everything that was necessary for us to be successful. In particular, I remember my junior year in my pre-calculus class, our class was averaging my class was averaging a D. And although, of course, that's not what my teacher wanted for us, she understood that that was something that was realistic given the fact that we didn't have calculators and we were expected to have these $100 calculators each, and our textbooks were so outdated. But instead of staying angry, I decided not only am I not going to drop out because of the shortages of space, but I became interested in helping other students who grow up in low-income schools. So I really think that my purpose on earth is in education policy, which is basically deciding how the budget is allocated. I realize that there's not an unlimited amount of money, but I do want to make sure that a decent amount of that budget goes to low-income schools so that they also have what the resources necessary for them to be successful. And along with that, I also want to help them to instill personal value so that they know they are more than just a low grade, that regardless of where they grew up, that they have the ability to be successful.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast about street resilience. We will catch you next time on the As Told by Bold podcast, a mini-series.